Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? And what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. The Canvas That Hungered. The Canvas That Hungered, written by Haweyaosman. The town of Eldermere had always been a place of quiet oddities, where the cobblestone streets whispered secrets and the air carried the scent of forgotten dreams. It was a town where stories did not fade. They settled in the cracks of old buildings and the hush of wind through empty streets. It was here that Alice found herself once more, sitting across from Silva in the dim glow of the cafe. Alice had never wanted to return to Eldermere. It held too many memories, too many ghosts. But she had no choice. Not after the letter arrived. Not after she saw Sebastian's familiar scrawl, shaky yet unmistakable. He was calling her back. Beside her, Silva tightened her grip on the crumpled letter, its ink smudged by nervous fingers. Silva had always been the braver one, the one who chased the unknown rather than shrinking from it. But even she hesitated now, her violet eyes darting between Alice and the worn paper on the table between them. "Are we really doing this?" Silva whispered. Alice exhaled, a shiver trailing down her spine. "We have to." The cafe hummed with the low murmur of conversations, the clink of cups against saucers. But to Alice, it all felt distant, as if the world had begun to tilt towards something unseen. The letter had changed everything. A deep unease coiled in Alice's gut, but she reached for the parchment again, smoothing its creases with trembling fingers. The inked words felt heavier this time, like a whispered plea lingering between the lines. "You finally came." The letters swirled, shifting ever so slightly as if they were still drying. Alice's breath caught in her throat. Had they just moved? Silva saw it too. Her hand clutched Alice's wrist. "Alice," she whispered, I think he's watching." Outside, the streetlights flickered. A shadow passed by the window, lingering just long enough for Alice to notice. But when she turned, there was nothing there. Nothing but the reflection of the cafe, warped slightly in the glass. And yet there, among the silhouettes of the patrons, two figures sat frozen mid-motion, mirroring Alice and Silva's own hesitation. Then, one of the reflections blinked. Silva gasped, stumbling back in her chair, nearly knocking over her untouched tea. The cafe seemed to dim, the air thick with something unseen yet suffocating. Alice's pulse roared in her ears. She knew then why Sebastian had disappeared, why his final masterpiece had remained unfinished. Because the canvas did not capture beauty, it devoured it. A quiet voice broke the tension. "Alice." A third person stood near their table, barely noticeable in the dim light. His name was Elias, a childhood friend they had long forgotten, or rather, one who had faded into the town's strange silence. He was pale, his sharp features framed by unkempt black curls, his presence carrying the scent of turpentine and dust. There was something about the way he looked at them, something knowing. "You got the letter too," he said, though it wasn't a question. Alice swallowed. "You know about it?" "I was there when he painted it," Elias murmured. "I told him to stop." Silva stiffened. "You knew?" Elias hesitated. "I didn't think it would last this long." A flicker of movement, Silva's reflection, or was it hers, trapped behind the glass. The cafe hummed on, oblivious. A faint echo of Alice's voice hung in the air, distorted as though carried through water. "Silva, don't look." But Silva did. And as her eyes locked onto the window, she saw something new. A third figure standing just behind Alice, not painted, not yet. The cafe lights flickered. The reflection sighed. A cold whisper curled around Silva's ear, not from Sebastian, not from Alice, but from the glass itself. There is always room for one more. The air grew thick, the scent of oil paint suffocating. The figures in the window shifted again. Silva could see them now, their eyes pleading, reaching out as though they could still be pulled free. A choice, a trap, a sacrifice. Elias reached forward, voice tight. It won't stop, not unless... The words never finished. The cafe trembled, a low hum vibrating through the walls, as if the very fabric of reality was fraying. Silva turned to Alice, only to find her staring, unblinking at the reflection, frozen. Alice! Silva reached for her, but her fingers passed through air, through mist, through something that was no longer solid. Alice's lips moved soundlessly. Her reflection inside the glass trembled. Then, before Silva could scream, the window swallowed the light. The cafe stood as it always had. Only the reflection remained, still shifting, its colors richer than before. And this time, it held 3 figures. Silva's breath came in ragged gasps. Her hand was still outstretched, her fingertips tingling with the sensation of reaching for someone who was no longer there. The patrons in the cafe continued their idle conversations, unaware. The world had not changed, and yet everything had. She turned back to the glass. Alice's reflection was still there. So was Elias's. But Alice and Elias were gone. Silva pressed a shaking hand to the window. The reflections mirrored her. They looked the same, but something was wrong. The eyes were too dark, the expressions too serene. And then, Alice smiled. Not a smile of recognition, not a smile of warmth, but something else, something knowing. Silva staggered back, heart hammering, bile rising in her throat. She could still feel Alice's presence, but it was not in the chair across from her. It was behind the glass, staring back, waiting. Waiting for what? A weight settled in Silva's lap. The letter. The ink had changed again. One final message, scrawled beneath Sebastian's familiar script. Paint with me. The cafe doors swung open with a gust of wind, rattling the cups on their saucers. The scent of oil paint flooded Silva's senses, thick and suffocating. The lights flickered once more. Then everything went dark.
Safe and sound. Safe and sound. 7:15 a.m. Go downstairs. Phone fully charged. Remove cable. Stare at phone wallpaper. Not familiar. Photo of huge oak in West Park at end of my street, where Rich proposed. Maybe took it yesterday. Maybe not. Not sure. Stare more. Check for messages. Mum, Sarah, Rich. Rich! Not heard from him in ages. Is he okay? Oh, he's replying to me. I didn't message him. I must have. Yes, look. Asked if he had a good weekend. Sent 23:03 yesterday. Was in bed by 10. Must have got up. Come downstairs. Forgotten. Sleepwalking. Again. Getting regular now. See a doctor. Whisper. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. Rich is fine. Am I okay? Reply. Short and sweet. Don't encourage the ex from hell. Don't know why I messaged him at all. Ping. It's your move on Words with Friends. What's that? Looks like Scrabble game. Never heard of it. Why is it on my phone? Quick look around it. I have 5 games in play. 5. It's my move in all of them. Didn't drink last night. Uninstall words with friends. Whisper. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. Coffee. Cinnamon roll. Sofa. Slightly more awake. Check phone again. More from Rich. Why did you get back in touch? Want to meet up? Ignore. Sarah. She says thanks with thumbs up. Thanks for what? Scroll messages. Yes, she can borrow my copy of Catch-22. Still own Catch-22? Thought I lost it ages ago. Scroll more. Told Sarah I found it. Don't remember that. Check bookshelves later. Reply to Mom. Yes, still coming for dinner on Thursday. Thursday? When did we plan that? Never mind. I'm free. I'll go. Add to calendar. Entry for Saturday. What's that? Date with Tom. No details. No memory of this. Message, Tom. Hi, are we meeting this Saturday? 8 a.m. now. Ring for doctor's appointment. 32nd in the queue. Sorry. No more appointments today. Please call back 8 a.m. tomorrow. System is enough to make me need a doctor. Whisper. Safe and sound, safe and sound. Bookshelves. No sign of Catch-22. Check 3 times. What's this? Copy of Never Let Me Go lying on top of other books. I never do that. Do I? Don't remember this edition. Cover is blue with picture of cassette tape. Thought mine was orange with girl in green dress. Flick through it. Pages dog-eared. I never do that. Spine cracked. I never do that. Must be mistaken. Phone beeps. Rich. I can see you're reading my messages. Tom replies, Hi, Grace. Yes? Royal Oak, 2 p.m. Saturday. Remember? You okay? I'm worried about you. He's not the only one. Why don't I remember things I should? Phone announces. There's movement at the front door. Letterbox clangs. Amazon delivery. Thanks, I think. Not expecting anything. Rip open cardboard zip. Copy of Catch-22. Green cover. Same edition I lost. Open Amazon app on phone. Ordered book yesterday. Did I? Didn't know Sarah wanted it till now. Or did I? Coincidence? Put phone down. Deep breath. Whisper. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. Phone alarm sounds. 9 a.m. Take pills. Yes. Take pills. Go to kitchen. Find clean glass. All glasses are clean. When did I wash up? Tap. Water. Pills. Swallow. Running low. Need to order repeat prescription. Open browser on phone. Doctors is bookmarked. Multiple tabs already open. What are they? First tab. Google, seems about right. Second tab, British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. Have I been looking for a therapist? Maybe I need one? Psychiatrist, perhaps more useful? Third tab, Royal Oak. I did book a table for Saturday, maybe. Check for confirmation email. Open Gmail. Premium bonds. You have won a prize. Go to Premium Bonds app. App not there. Check all screens. No sign. Must have uninstalled. Why? We'll check for prizes on website later. Message from Rich. Don't open it. Search Gmail for Royal Oak. Booking confirmation. 3 people, 2 p.m. Saturday. 3 people. Me? Tom? Who else? Message Tom. Who are we meeting on Saturday? He's not online. Phone rings. Withheld number. Hello? Man's voice. Is that Grace? I'm responding to the enquiry you made through my website. Are you still looking for a therapist? Did I do that? Hang up. Rings back. Don't answer. Too weird. Whisper. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. More coffee. Must order meds. Back to browser. Bookmarks. Medical practice online. Order repeat prescription. Done. Bookmarks. What did I just see? Lingerie site? Wasn't looking at lingerie. Click on link. There are 4 items in your basket. Click on basket. Red peephole bra and matching satin G-string. Pink see-through baby doll. Black crotchless bodysuit. All in my size. None to my taste. Shopping for Tom? Not his thing either. More what Rich would like. Ugh. Empty basket. Delete bookmark. Whisper. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. Phone beeps. Tom, I don't know who we're meeting. You said it was a surprise. See messages from last night. Were you drunk? Surprise for me too. Check last night's messages with Tom. 23. Message deleted. 23:08. Message deleted. 23:12. Message deleted. Whisper. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. Not drunk. Possibly not fully conscious. Sleep texting? Need stronger pills. Call doctor again tomorrow. Good news needed. Open premium bonds. Website online. Password not recognized. Type again. Slowly. Password not recognized. Type again. Very slowly. You only have one more attempt before your account is locked. Was I drunk last night? No. Worked till 8. Home. Showered. Changed. Bed by 10. Back to kitchen. Open booze cupboard. 4 ciders and half bottle of Bailey's missing. Sleep drinking? Whisper. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. No hangover. Didn't drink all that. Brought friend home. Who drinks? Bed by 10 makes no sense. Would remember someone else in house. Check spare room anyway. No one there. Bed not slept in. Phone beeps. Rich. I have to look. I miss you. Are you ignoring me? Check all rooms. Front door locked. Back door locked. Spare key. Gone. Message Tom. Have you got my spare key? Phone beeps. Sarah. Hey, chick. You okay today? Don't suppose you can send me the pic of that new restaurant we saw last week? I knew I'd forget the name. Ha ha ha. Tom replies. Not this time. Gave it back to you on Friday. Are you okay? Check camera roll for Sarah. Multiple pics of girl asleep in bed. Wait, can't have taken these pics. That's me. Safe and sound. Safe and sound. There were way too many flies for an empty house. Schizophrenia is a bitch, and I don't usually curse when I'm writing. I like the classic style of Stephen Crane and the refined worlds of Oscar Wilde, and I know things have changed a lot since this kind of gentleman went extinct. But still, there is something about correct writing that turns everything into poetry. Even these stories. I continue now. Schizophrenia is a bitch. Medicated or unmedicated. Dealing with not knowing what is real or not can still be challenging day by day. From the happy little bunnies hopping out of an unexistent hole to say hi graciously and brighten your day, to the four-eyed woman whose face was falling rotten into pieces in front of my astonished eyes, while she only wanted to offer my breakfast one autumn morning. Anything can be frightening. I thought I was never going to have the courage to move far from the city, far from the hospitals, from the gentrification, and the everyday influx of strangers. It made me calm to know I could just pop out a card from my pocket that shows my mental condition, and people would help me in the most scary situations. Reality pushed me outside of the city. I found the best house to which I could move. Affordable, 2 stories, old cracking wooden floors, unfinished basement, and a big yard with space to grow your vegetables, your very own lavender plants, with the freedom to sit outside and write while listening to nothing but the chickadees and robins singing. No neighbors, no annoying neighbors, because as much as I liked the activity of the city, living in a 24 floors building could be a tiny bit too noisy sometimes. A 100-year-old house that needed some love. Honestly, for the price I paid, I had all the love in the world to give. I didn't overthink before buying it. I didn't want to get into details, so I put the signature on the paper and bought it as it was. The first night was a nightmare. The mice activity was so high in the basements and between the walls that it looked like they were throwing me a welcoming party. My eyes were wide open, and I kept just thinking, I need a cat. I need a cat. I need to get a cat. I didn't challenge my judgment or how factual the existence of mice in a house this old would be. I could smell the mice, their nests, their filth, their spawns. And if there is something I rarely get in life, it's olfactory illumination, also called phantom smells. I didn't dare tell any of my family members about the nightmare because I had been told many, many times that moving out of the city was not for everyone. I didn't want to worry my mom. She tried to persuade me to move in with her, inviting me to stay more than once, offering me homemade food, and promising me peace and clean laundry. I spent the night the best I could, turning from one side to the other, trying to get comfortable and used to every noise. I woke up the morning after with a horrible headache when I moved the curtains in the bedroom to let the sunlight in. I saw at least 30 flies, scattered, sunbathing, flapping their wings against one of the windows, and I jumped back to my bed in disgust. I had my phone fully charged and used one of my favorite methods to discover if my mind was playing games or not. I took a picture of the flies. You see, when you have schizophrenia, if you take a picture or make a video at the precise moment that you see the craziest things, you can actually check on your phone if what you are seeing is real. The mind evolved to be tricky and a vile traitor sometimes. Still, it didn't evolve as much as not to be tricked by a cell phone camera. So the hallucination you are having, if it's just a mere creation of the mind, will not appear either in the video or in a picture. The flies were there. Way too many for a house that had its windows closed for the past few weeks. There was a family there before. I don't think this was normal, even for a country house. It wasn't even summer. The weather didn't look inviting for flies, and my house was not a warm place for them to live happily in. I opened the 4 curtains individually to reveal the flies blackening each window. I sprayed them and saw them fall one by one. I vacuumed the remains and moved to the bathroom for a relaxing bath. Relaxing was something that I wouldn't do for a while. I opened the faucet, and the bubbling sound of dry pipes came first, letting a little string of water fall that looked horribly yellow. By the time my bathtub was full, all I had was pea-colored water that smelled like sulfur, and it made me lose the last drop of hope I had that morning. I walked downstairs to the basement. I had been in a basement twice in my life, and one of those times was when I had to check the new house with the realtor a few weeks before moving. I wouldn't say I liked basements. The swamp smell, the spiders, the spider webs that were abandoned, meaning the spiders are now somewhere else where we can't see them. The mice, their horrible smell, and the furnace, the root of significant nightmares that come from old stories and many, many horror movies that I wish I hadn't seen. I took a gun with me. I know I shouldn't have had one, but my dad, who didn't know better, advised me to take his gun since being alone in a house can be challenging for a woman. My nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, but so was a police station, so I thought it was an okay idea. This time, I had to use it. It was loaded and ready to shoot some cans outside in case my days turned more boring. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard noises coming from the water well. Something was struggling to get out. The well was a little bit deep, but still, anyone my size could have gotten out of there. I thought, well, great. Now I will have to shut a wild animal, because there is no way I will let an upset possum or rabid raccoon roam my basement. I cautiously approached the water well. The noise grew louder and more frantic. My heart pounded in my chest as I gripped my gun tightly, ready to defend myself. With each step closer, the sounds became clearer, and I could hear muffled cries for help. I peered into the darkness, straining my eyes to make sense of shapes. And then, as if emerging from my nightmares, there she was, tied, her clothes torn and covered in filth, her hair tangled, wounded on every inch of her body, her mouth shut, her hands firmly fastened. Her teary eyes called for help, but all I could do was just shoot. I pressed the trigger 1 time, 2, and even 3 times, with my eyes shut and my teeth grinding as hard as I could as she lay there, motionless and calm. I took my phone out of my pocket and did what I should have done before shooting. I took a picture and put myself in the frame, too. The dead body in the background, the dirty well, and me hoping none of it was real. Hoping I wasn't real. I took a picture, and there we were. The flash blinded my eyes, and I saw myself, a newborn killer, staring at the screen. She was still there. Oh, so still. Oh, there were too many flies for an empty house. And without wanting it, I finished someone else's dirty job. Plight at the museum. The car's tires skidded over the rain-wet road, squealing in the night. Edward Reiki gritted his teeth. He didn't like driving this fast, but the situation called for it. This had been the first night after changing the museum's exhibits, his first actual decision on the job. At midnight, he'd gotten a call. The motion sensor alarms had detected someone inside the building. Someone had broken in. What a disaster. He gripped the steering wheel in a white-knuckle grip and fought to keep control of his 2-ton beast. Burnhelm Museum's windows glinted in his headlights like a cat's eyes in the dark. No lights were on. The place lay in shadow. The multi-story building sat still. The alarm's bleat rose over the roar of the rain and the car's rumble. Seeing the place with black eyes, whilst the alarm squealed, made Edward's stomach shrivel. He wished he had someone else with him now. He had goosebumps. Hell, he'd even take the previous curator, Stanley Graham's. Stanley had lost a few of his marbles as he'd aged. He'd covered the museum walls with paintings of cute puppies and kittens. Puppies and kittens only had a place in a museum if they were the early pets of cave people. Stanley had also left him a note. "Dear Edward, there is something you should know about the Burnhelm Museum. You see, there is life in the pain." Stanley had not managed to write beyond that. The word ended in a ragged scratch as the pen flew off the page. The heart attack had ended Stanley's capacity to use words, breathe, or pump blood. Edward assumed the guy was trying to tell him something about getting old, but he'd been unable to figure it out yet. It might not even mean anything. The man was a few sandwiches shy of a picnic. Edward killed the engine and dashed through the rain to the museum's open mouth. He held the collar of his jacket over his head as he ran to try to keep the torrent at bay. Edward tested the front door. It didn't budge. Whoever it was, they had not broken in through here or through any of the front windows. Edward fished the key out of his pocket, shivering as his shoes filled with water, and opened the door. Inside, the rain quieted down to a steady hiss. The alarm's bleat was much louder in here. A potent, earthy smell permeated the air. Edward rumpled his nose and raised his hands to his ears. Where was the damn thing? He knew it was around here somewhere. He fumbled in the dark, slapping the fob of his keys against the wall. This task was so much easier in daylight. At last, he found the alarm box, and some magic from the fob silenced the screech. He sighed, his ears thanking him for ending their torment. The darkened halls of the museum waited for him in silence. A low rumble of thunder vibrated through the floor beneath his feet for a very long time. A resounding thump, like that of a gun, echoed down the corridors. The blood turned to ice in his veins. Yes, there was somebody else here with him. Here, in his home, away from home, inside his dream. How dare they? It hurt his soul. When he was a boy, his grandfather had taken him to a natural history museum. The cave dwellers and their early tools had ignited wonder. The fossils and dinosaur bones had cast a magic. The Tyrannosaurus, Rex, mammoths, and megalodons had inspired terror and admiration. Edward wanted only to share the same awe he'd felt the first time. It was an honorable goal. There was an obvious way to achieve this. He had to be the best museum curator ever. But one thing had stood in his way, at least until now. He always started afresh. He came in, did away with the old, and swept in with the new. Edward couldn't stand to leave something standing that wasn't his. It didn't matter whether it worked. He discarded functional systems and inadequate systems. Unfortunately, such an attitude did not make him many friends. And so, he'd bounced around from museum to museum, never quite reaching the desired position. But now, he was Bernhelm Museum's curator. He'd realized his lifelong ambition. At last, after so much struggle, and now this. Youngsters and drug-addled maniacs breaking in, with their spray paints and their broken bottles of beer and their, good God, used condoms. This place was his, and he wasn't about to hand it over to some hooligans or street urchins pulling a prank. Edward scowled and closed the door behind him and locked it. He hit the lights and called out to the intruders. "It's too late to escape," he said. "The police are already on their way." A lie. "You never should have come here." A high-pitched coughing sound bounced around the building. It came from many places at once, back and forth. Edward's eyes widened. There were many criminals in here, and they were laughing at him. Shaking, he clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms, and marched into the museum. It took him longer than it should have to notice what was wrong with his exhibits. The paintings were empty. Jaw hanging down to his chest, Edward stumbled to a halt. He squinted at a painting that had, until tonight, held a picture of a T. Rex roaring before a Cretaceous backdrop. His fury fell away to dumbfoundedness. He tried to articulate his confusion, but all that came out was, Next to him, flies were buzzing about something brown. It was about 2 feet long and approximately 6 inches in diameter. Excrement. Edward blinked. It wasn't unheard of for vagrants to soil the places they entered with their waste. But no human on the planet could produce this much. Had these lunatics squished their leavings together to fool him into thinking that the deep rumble vibrated through the earth once more? Edward jumped and squealed and spun around. Nothing was behind him. His heart hammered high up in his chest. It seemed to lodge at the base of his throat, making breathing hard. If he didn't get his pulse under control, he'd end up the same way as Stanley Graham's, dead of a heart attack. Some distant part of Edward's mind was piecing bits together. Little by little, you see, there is life in the pain. Had he meant to write, "There is life in the paintings"? Was that why he'd covered the walls with pictures of cute baby animals? So that, when they came to life, something was moving at the periphery of his vision on both sides. At last, Edward understood. It's not always a good idea to change everything and start afresh when you take over someone else's role. They might have had a good reason for doing the things they did. You should at least acquaint yourself with the position before scrapping their work. But it was a bit late now. Yet, for one split second before his agonizing death, he felt once more that awe he'd experienced as a child. And then the raptors had him, the unbecoming of Belinda Blackwell. There are few places Belinda Blackwell likes to lay down to rest more than upon her husband's chest. He hadn't been expecting her. Belinda hadn't been expecting to be home so soon either. What with the unpredictability of her father's illness, demanding open schedules from his children, someone on call at all times, lest the old man die without one of them there to hold his hand. When Oscar had come to join them a week early, something about a case closing timely and a stiffening in his shoulders. When Belinda inquired about her sister-in-law, she pounced on the opportunity to bid her brother and father adieu and return early to the husband she so desperately missed. Finding Etienne still tangled in their bed covers, she had stripped down to her chemise and crawled atop him slowly. He had thrashed hard upon stirring and finding her there, his eyes foggy with confusion and fright. But she had kissed his face and rubbed his arms, whispering, "It's me. It's only me," until he relaxed back into the sheets. Now they rest quietly, teetering on the line between half asleep and half awake, Belinda's ear pressed to Etienne's chest to hear the steady thump, thump, thump of his heart. "Well, I'm glad Oscar will be with him," Etienne says appeasingly, having listened in silence to her stories from London. I think it will do him as much good as father. He seemed like he could use some time away. Away from what? I'm not sure. Belinda plays with a loose thread on Etienne's nightshirt. I feel bad saying away from his wife, but all signs point to it being the truth. He seemed uncomfortable when I brought her up, but he wouldn't tell me anything specific. Etienne's hand tightens where it rests on the nape of her neck. Then I hope that time will serve them both well. I do too. She tilts her head to observe the strong profile of her husband's nose. "And you?" she teases. "Has time away from me served you well? All I managed to accomplish was missing my wife." He tucks his chin to look down at her, though I have been doing some research in your absence. Yes, I've noticed. The entire walk to their chambers was an obstacle course of books and journals on every tabletop and cast aside in the middle of the hallway, like he had thrown them down as he was walking. And before that, there was the cook coming to greet her in the foyer with concerns of her husband's increasingly strange demands while Belinda was away. His supposed need for rabbit hearts and pitchers of salt water, bunches of fresh rosemary left to dry on the windowsill for exactly 36 hours, and demands of her and the housemaid to not disturb him when his doors are closed. Certain tasks he'd undertaken where it was vital he not be interrupted. For the sake of goodwill, she gave them both the rest of the morning off. Belinda knows of her husband's beliefs, glimpses into a world of ritual and wardship, studies of augury and communion and necromancy that he prefers she not get too close to. Etienne shifts underneath her, and she reads discomfort in his movements. She strokes a hand down his cheek, so he knows not to be ashamed of it all on her behalf. What has prompted it? Have I come to see you while I was gone? He's told her, too, of the spirit that haunts him, the one that looks just like her, that follows him around the house and watches him from doorways and windows and stares at him unblinking, stares at him like he's done something unforgivable. Belinda has never seen herself, and Etienne claims the spirit has never appeared while she's in the house. She fretted for days over having to leave him when word of her father's illness arrived, knowing what it might invite back into Etienne's life. But there was no getting around the trip. And besides, Etienne had sworn his confidence that that time was behind them. It would appear that he'd spoken too soon. His eyebrows tick up at the middle, like he's attempting to contain his emotion. I thought it was over, he whispers. It's been so long. I feel like a fool, letting my guard down as I have been. A deep ache swells behind Belinda's ribcage. She squeezes Etienne tighter. You've been happy. It's not foolish to hope. What have you found? There is a ritual, one for banishment. I have been completing the prerequisite steps over the past week. Oh? Belinda struggles to understand. Yes. There is only one step left to do. It won't be easy. His fingers flex against her back, a signal that he is thinking hard. He seems to choose his words carefully. The act won't be physically challenging, but I fear the toll it will have on my heart and constitution. Belinda frowns. It sounds taxing. Are you sure this is the only way? She considers, not for the first time, bringing up the possibility of relocation, abandoning this home that torments him, so in favor of a fresh start, a life away from paranoia and body doubles. She can't see before she can muster up the right words. He's saying, it will be worth it. I want to do it. I want my Belinda to be the only Belinda in my life. She smothers a grin against the column of his throat. I'd quite like that as well. Etienne is quiet for a long moment before speaking again. I won't pretend it isn't terrible, but it is necessary, too. I want my wife to have a good life, and I need to be better to give one to her. I need to be rid of this. A strong rush of affection surges through Belinda. Oh, she loves this man, something awful. She'd follow him into hell. Then you will be brave, and you will be successful. She rises and falls with the depth of Etienne's answering sigh. You sound so much like her, he mutters. Like who? She asks. Like Belinda. Belinda's thumb falters where it was rubbing a soothing path along his collarbone. What? A giggle bubbles out of her, confusion mingling with sleepy amusement. It's uncanny. You've never been this good before. He doesn't seem to register her stiffening, or he does, and ignores it. You've never come to me like this, lay upon me like this. You must know what I'm going to do. Etienne, it won't work. Etienne raises his voice, speaking over her. I won't let it. Belinda lifts her head to look her husband in the eyes. A coldness cracks through her when she sees the resolution in his face. Etienne, I don't... Her voice breaks off into a scared whisper. It's me. He shakes his head. My wife knows me better than this. She tells me when to expect her. You've misjudged. I know you're not really her this time. Belinda curses her attempt at being romantic. He thinks she's haunting him, not surprising him. She's never been so near him when he's in the middle of one of these supposed spectral visits. It's sobering. It's frightening. She tries to sit up and grunts when Etienne uses his hand on her neck to ease her back down again. His hold is strong, not enough to hurt, but in her shock, she goes easy. Etienne's mouth is at her ear. My wife is not to be home for a few days yet. By then, all of this will be dealt with and done. It will be like it never happened. She won't have any part of it. She will not have such a weak, nervous husband. His voice shakes. I will keep her safe. It's all the warning Belinda gets before the knife is plunged into her back. She jerks violently. Pain whips through her, fast and brutal. It's like someone has dumped a full basin of water over her. No. No. The sensation is real. And it's not water. It's blood. Hot and wet and slick and spreading fast, sticking her chemise to her skin. She frantically shoves herself up, grappling for a place on her back she can't reach, too low for the arm she stretches over her shoulder, too high for the one she stretches under. She arches, incapacitated by the pain, her mouth opening and closing like a fish thrown onto rocks, gasping into air that isn't helping her situation, feeling inches from death. The knife digs into her shifting skin, or is her skin digging into the knife? The awful, writhing, sawing sensation ripping through her. She's never been stabbed before, but this cannot be normal. Flashes of rabbit hearts and salt come to her. And no, of course this isn't normal. Not by Etienne's design. She hunches, trying to scramble away from the pain. But there's nowhere to go that it doesn't follow. She shoves her face into the pillow beside her husband's stunned face, her hands fisting at the sheets. Etienne grips her hips tight. Belinda, she can only answer with a whimper. She's trembling so hard, she can barely open her mouth anymore, for how hard her teeth chatter. No. Etienne pushes against her shoulders. She doesn't understand what he wants. She doesn't understand what's happening. Dear God, no. His touch moves to her face, and he wrenches her head back with his hands shoved up into her hair. Belinda. He jams his fingers under her jaw, ignoring her choking, feeling for something. Upon finding it, his face goes white. Belinda. Again, more urgently, wrestling to sit them both upright. Belinda. It's all coming to her in flashes. The horrible red smear on Etienne's cheek. The wetness that's dripping down the back of her legs. The sudden realization that she can't support herself. She slumps against Etienne. Dazedly, she thinks of her parents, of all the men they'd wanted her to marry. A parade of surgeons and doctors with their deep pockets and upturned noses. Professionals who would know what to do with a gaping wound. Professionals she had rejected for the love of a poet. Her poet, who had nothing to offer but a quiet life and endless adoration. Etienne cradles her against him, rocking them back and forth. He's sobbing. Why are you here? You weren't supposed to be here. I thought you were the specter. Please believe me. Oh God, please forgive me. He sounds wrecked. Belinda wants to comfort him, but she can't pick her head up. Then darkness clouds her vision, and she can't do anything at all anymore. Belinda blinks awake. The ground is uncomfortable beneath her back. What is she doing on the ground? Etienne is kneeling by her side, head in his hands. There's something red all over his hands. Belinda pushes herself up, reaching out to touch Etienne's knee. He jolts at the barest brush of her fingers. Belinda. He sounds relieved. He yanks her forward, and she goes crashing against his chest. Why is his heart beating so fast? That red substance on his hands is getting all over her now, staining her crisp white chemise. Why does it smell so strongly of metal? Her head feels fuzzy. Really? Why is she on the ground? A moment ago, she was laying in bed, gossiping with Etienne about her brother's marriage. Did she fall out of bed? Did she hit her head? Is that why everything feels so off? I'm sorry, she murmurs slowly. I'm not sure what happened. Did I fall? You... Etienne is shaking. She must have really scared him. I fixed it. It's all right. Fixed what? How long was I out? It doesn't matter. You're all right. It's all right now. Belinda frowns. Etienne, is my head bleeding? He winces. What? Why are you asking me that? Blood. She can't think of anything else to say. She should get a cloth, something to clean him with. She pushes away from him, bracing against the edge of the mattress to stand. Her hand sinks into something good and wet. Before she can search for the source of it, Etienne pitches forward, grabbing her by the cheeks and pulling her to look back at him. It makes her head spin. "Don't look," he says. He sounds gravely serious. Belinda's heart stutters. "What?" "Don't look," like a petulant child. Belinda can't stop herself. She's wriggling out of his grip before he can stop her again, ignoring his cry, turning to look at herself, laying dead in a mess of blood on the bed. Herself on the bed. Blood. All air leaves her. She jerks to her feet, stumbling backwards. She can't look away. She's just laying there. Her hair stuck to her forehead, and her chemise soaked through with red. Her eyes are still open. Behind her, Etienne remains on the ground. His voice is low, thick with grief. "There was an accident. I did what I had to fix it." "What?" Her voice sounds like it's coming from miles away. She doesn't even know what to ask. She can't look away. "I didn't know if it would work. I had only read about the ritual. I've never attempted it. But the journals said I could comb through time and bring something back with me." He looks up. "I brought you." Belinda's stomach turns. Etienne's face is wet with tears. "Where is she?" "You brought me from the past?" "From before the accident. Yes. It was the only way. You were already gone." His voice breaks, and he hangs his head. His shoulders are shaking. Belinda looks at him. She looks at herself. But what of the Etienne in the past? Are you the same as him? Our paths have diverged, he says gravely. Well, then, what of that Etienne? Is he all alone now? How must he feel, having just had his wife taken from him? Etienne shudders, his eyes darkening. I know how he feels. For some reason, that's what does Belinda in. Her stomach lurches, and she stumbles to the lavatory, shoving the door closed behind her before retching into the sink. Nothing comes up. It makes her feel worse. She looks up into the mirror. Yes, that's her face, staring back at her with wide eyes and tangled hair. But yes, that was her face, too, staring back at her from the bed. It feels like dying just to think of it. She can't imagine what dying must really feel like. Can't imagine how anything can be worse than this terror that's seizing her insides. Etienne's voice comes from the other side of the door, muffled and pleading. Please, I didn't want this. All I wanted was you. He nudges at the door, like a dog desperate to get in. She staggers over to open it. Etienne is still on his knees, still on the ground. When the door is open wide enough, he drags himself forward with his fingernails digging into the wood floor. He bends low to kiss her ankles. She closes her eyes tight at the sensation. My love, my life. His tears drip onto her foot. I wish I hadn't done it. I wish I hadn't done it. What did you do? A voice in her head begs her to ask, and somewhere deeper, somewhere darker, somewhere inside her that already knows, somewhere she can't reach, is asking, which part do you regret? Tessa. They bury Belinda in the garden. Belinda watches numbly while Etienne strips that other her from the bloody chemise, redressing her in something soft and clean. He gathers her hair and fastens it into a braid to keep it off her face. And his touch is so gentle and reverential that this time, when Belinda excuses herself to retch into the sink, she throws up the entire contents of her stomach. Belinda gets dressed herself, tugging on a gown, though her hands shake so hard that Etienne has to help her with the fastenings. She follows behind Etienne and stares at her own face, lax where it rests against her husband's. Their husband's shoulder as he carries her down the stairs and out the back door. Is that what she looks like when she sleeps? They leave the bloody mattress as it is for the housemaid to find. We'll say you were with child, Etienne had said, not meeting her gaze. They won't ask questions if they believe you lost something. Etienne is right, as he tends to be. When Belinda retires inside, hours later, the silent vigil over the little upturned patch of dirt beneath her favorite tree becoming too much for her to bear. The housemaid, Miss Clark, is already waiting for her, wringing her hands in the hallway. All it takes is just enough performance of Belinda's averted eyes and a hand pressed to her stomach for Miss Clark's face to drop. She coos sympathetically, fussing over Belinda so tenderly that Belinda is weeping before she can hold herself back. We buried her in the garden, Belinda croaks. All by yourselves, ma'am? Miss Clark asks, sounding surprised. We couldn't bear to leave her, Belinda says. And now she's telling the truth. Then she tells another. I don't know what happened. Belinda looks out from their bedchamber, trying to ignore the sharp smell of vinegar and lemon. The bed stripped of its linens behind her, the way the mattress has been flipped. She watches Etienne as the sky goes from blue to orange. Hours pass, and still he remains, bent over the grave of his dead wife, while his wife watches over him. After what feels like an eternity, he rises, stretching his arms. He turns, shielding his eyes against the setting sun, to look back up at the house. Belinda tries not to notice how he flinches when he spots her, feeling like a specter in the window. The tragedy of Frederick Thorpe. The guards dragged a man through the gallows. His eyes were flushed and red, and his face was swollen from holding his breath, for he refused to allow even a single tear to fall. The guards pulled the man up the stairs. The soddened and weathered wood creaked and bounced with each step. They carried the man across the stage of the scaffold to the hangman, whose eyes were buried in the hollows of the Hessian burlap fastened to his face. A crowd had gathered in the gallows. Among them was King Theobald, the crown of the Northern Empire, who sat front and center of this spectacle. King Theobald raised his hand, and the crowd reduced its whooping to a whisper. Senti milione. You have been charged with, tried, and convicted of embezzlement and treason of the highest order. You packed your purloined purse with pilfers and compromised the integrity of our nation. You are hereby stripped of your duties as High Commander, and for your transgressions you shall reimburse the crown with your life. Senti drew a deep breath, but before the hangman could cinch the rope, Senti coughed to the crowd. I, Senti milione, am a convicted man, and I maintain my innocence. But since my sentence is irrevocable, I have only one request that I wish, in my final moments of life, to be granted. King Theobald flicked his wrist, and the hangman stepped away from the edge of the scaffold stage. And what might that be? Someone is missing from the crowd, and I would like for that person to be present. Seeing their face would comfort me. Who? Frederick the 14th, Rory, a captain of the Northern Imperial Army, climbed out of the crowd and approached King Theobald. I shall fetch Frederick for you, sir. Very well. We shall resume upon your return. Ta. Frederick Thwittyton stepped away from the window in his bedchamber. The spectators had gathered in the gallows below, and they were jeering loudly as the hangman held the nape of the man on the platform. Frederick threw his back to the wall near the window, working his thumb and pointer into the fissures of his forehead. One moment, I'm the chief officer, and in the next, I'll be High Commander. High Commander. I'll likely be crowned tomorrow. I must prepare. Frederick, at his desk, retrieved paper and a fountain pen, then began to write. Dearest King Theobald, our illustrious crown, I am most truly obliged to you. An image twinkled in his periphery. Across the room, above the mantel, there was a painting, a portrait of three men of similar stature and countenance to each other. Also to Frederick the 14th, but to a lesser degree. From on high, they stared down at Frederick the 14th as he crossed the room towards them. Tomorrow, I shall be named High Commander of the Northern Imperial Army, and I will follow in your footsteps. And maybe one day, my personage will join yours in portraiture. He received 2 knocks at his door. Who's there? Celia, sir. Captain Rory would like to join your company. Frederick opened the door to reveal Celia, the chambermaid, and Rory, a step behind her. Rory. Sir, there has been a request made for you. What is the nature of this request? Am I allowed inside? Frederick ushered Rory inside. King Theobald has granted Senti one wish, Has he not been executed? In only a moment's time. But never mind that, Frederick. Senti's wish is to see you. Frederick flew across the room and away from Rory. See me? For what reason? Frederick, you are but his dearest friend. What is the reason for your delay? Frederick turned his back to Rory. There is no reason other than that I would not want to see a hanging in the gallows. But you have witnessed your fair share of executions, none of which have been dear friends, Frederick said. So what shall I tell Senti? Tell Senti that my love is with him, and that his visage shall be forever reflected in my duties. Of High Commander, Frederick nodded his head. I'll likely be crowned tomorrow. His ill repute shall be absolved with me. Ill repute? Are you suggesting that you believe Senti to be guilty? Senti was convicted. Frederick kicked at the lint littering the floor. Whether I believe that he is guilty or innocent matters not. His shadow will swing in the gallows, inevitably. What am I hearing, sir? Have you not shed a tear at the thought of his absence? Yes, many times. Then how could you dare allow him to leave without one final show of your affection? I think that it is best for both he and I to not meet under such conditions, no matter how sentimental. Frederick turned his back to Rory. The crowds below began to bellow beneath the cloudy sky. Rory sneered, slamming the door behind him. Frederick XIV to the portrait. Father, grandfather, great-grandfather, I hope that after the ceremony tomorrow, you'll acknowledge me as one of your own, an aurora in the sky of our heritage. I hope that I will have proven myself worthy in thine eye. King Theobald belted out from the gallows. Centimilione. Frederick returned to the window, but did not look out. You have been charged with, tried, and convicted of embezzlement and treason of the highest order. You packed your purloin purse with pilfers and compromised the integrity of our nation. You are hereby stripped of your duties as High Commander, and for your transgressions, you shall reimburse the crown with your life. Frederick's face twisted centripetally into his head, wringing out but one tear that trekked the contour of his cheek to his chin. King Theobald. Hangman, allow Centimilione to pay his debts. The wood of the gallows outside creaked. The lone tear from Frederick's face croaked when it splattered across the floor, and the sound of Senti's final grunt echoed. To patrilineage, the wind stirred recklessly, carrying waves of rainwater across the land. Lightning found Frederick's bedchamber, and thunder clapped in his ear, waking him from his slumber. He held his aching head. Celia, Celia. The chambermaid rushed inside with a candelabra. Yes, sir. I cannot see. With the candle from her candelabra, she lit more candles, placing them at various spots throughout the room. Fetch me a glass of water. My head is tender and sore. Celia left the room. Frederick laid on his pillow until he heard a voice. "Son." Frederick opened his eyes, and standing at his bedside was his father, Frederick the 13th. "We must go now." Frederick could see his grandfather, Frederick the 12th, staring out of the window, and Frederick 11th, his great-grandfather, admiring the portrait. Father, grandfather, great-grandfather, why must you leave now? I seek wise counsel. Your ways have offended us. Frederick 11th said, "There is no way that we could accept you as you are." Frederick the 12th said, "And we will not offer wise counsel. Your legacy is now your own." Frederick the 14th said, "Thunder hammered, and lightning seemingly struck the center of the bedchamber, forcing Frederick the 14th to shield his eyes from the blinding light." Frederick opened his eyes. "Father, Father." Frederick searched the room, but they were gone. In their wake, he padded across the parquet floor to his mantel. He squinted at the portrait, and what he saw poisoned his heart. Only the three heads of his patriarchy remained. Their bodies had disappeared entirely. Celia handed him the glass of water. "Are you okay?" Frederick kept his face in the fold of his elbow. He thumbed up at the portrait. "Tell me what you see, Celia. Your great-grandfather, grandfather, and father. Can you see the whole of them?" "Yes, sir, I can. I must rest." Frederick chugged his glass of water and sent Celia away before climbing sluggishly into bed. He laid with his eyes wide. The torrent raged outside. "I declare war." Frederick snapped his fingers. "More spirits." He reclined in his gilded chaise lounge with a glass in his fist, which Celia refilled. Frederick finished the glass in one gulp, then dropped it. The thick crystal thumped across the varnished wood. He stumbled from the chaise lounge and grabbed a hold of two harlots, and they guided him to the bed. Present were two officers, Francis and Giles, each heaped with a pair of women and spirits in their midst. "How's it feel to have an empire under your command?" Francis jeered. "Grand, and the luxury to rest on your laurels in the lap of an impregnable kingdom," Giles said. "Swell." Frederick looked to the women. "Kiss me, will you?" The two women pressed their faces into his. He received a knock at the door. "Who dares disturb me?" Frederick burped. "Celia, sir." "Are you aware, Celia, that we are engaged in official military duties?" "Yes, sir." "Then why do you bother our securing of this great nation?" "The chief officer says he must see you now." "Allow the sap in." Rory rushed in. "Mr. Rory, chief officer, have you come to join in the luxuries afforded to our ranks?" "No, sir." "Then why do you—" Frederick burped again. "Why do you dare interrupt our briefing?" "The Southern Empire, sir," Rory said. Frederick slurred. "Yes, they have declared war." Frederick puckered up instantaneously. His eyelids spread wide. His pupils shrunk to little black dots, and his eyes receded far into skull. He folded his dressing gown across his chest and crossed his legs. The South has declared war, you say? What must we do? But you are the High Commander, right? King Theobald rejected their demands and accepted their declaration of war. He has since issued a decree. Very well. Frederick stumbled to the center of the room. Everyone out, save for the chief officer. Only Frederick and Rory remained. High Commander, what is your plan? Our nation's security is at stake. I know. With his arms crossed high on his chest, Frederick crept across the room to his mantle. He laid his head into his rested elbow. He looked up to his portrait. 3 silhouettes now stained the canvas. Chief Officer, Rory observed Frederick's constitution with a hawk's eye. Yes, High Commander? Look up at the portrait and tell me what you see. Your great-grandfather, grandfather, and your father. Why? Do you see the whole of them? Yes, I do. Heavens, gather the rest of our staff. I will meet you all in the Hall of Mirrors. Yes, sir. Rory exited the bedchamber. Frederick to the emptied portrait. How could you have abandoned me at such an inopportune time? Frederick's eyes were deep, dark portholes that revealed no soul. Celia entered. Yes, sir. He raised his glass. More spirits, please. 3. The soul of a man. Frederick hunched forward while clearing the gown from his feet. Tottered into the Hall of Mirrors. In the center was an expansive table with 15 chairs measuring its circumference. The army staff silently observed the High Commander's disposition. Frederick looked them all over and pointed out an unfamiliar figure, a kimono-clad, ashen-faced woman. Who's she? Kitty. She lifted her face, slightly peeking under her brow. A medium. Why should we need a... Frederick burped. A medium? She will be of assistance as we plot the fate of our empire. She couldn't possibly serve as our wise counsel. We, the staff of the Northern Imperial Army, conceded that neither of us but one is able to offer wise counsel. But you are the best of the best, are you not? Our very best was plucked from among us, Rory said. Now we must seek wise counsel elsewhere. Where else? From beyond the grave. Frederick waved his hand. Under no circumstances shall we do such a thing. High Commander, you must understand, lives are at stake. Your reputation is at stake. And since you cannot lead us, then we must source our dearly departed friend. Frederick turned his back, observing the staff through the mirrors. Senti milione, centi, senti. Frederick humbled into the circle of fog on the glass. You remember him, don't you, High Commander? Right. Of course. Why wouldn't I? A great man. Then there should be no objections. Rory turned to the medium. Kitty, if you will, please bring to us our dearly departed Senti Milione. Kitty placed 2 Japanese taiko drums on the table before her and clanged them rhythmically. She left them alone, and the rhythm continued in her absence. She leaped weightlessly from the floor. With the fabric flagging from her frail frame, she raced across the polished mahogany from end to end, mumbling a chant. She stopped. On her back, she convulsed atop the table, arching her body before falling to the floor. From the floor, a figure rose, the soul of Centimilione. The army staff could not believe their eyes. Senti? Rory, it is I. The two hugged. Staff, what a pleasure to be in your presence once again. Senti found that Frederick was huddled in a corner of glass. Frederick, my dear friend, join us. How? Frederick crawled to the table side. It has been so long since I last saw your face. My final request was to see you, but you didn't show. I know. How come? I couldn't bear to see you in that moment. Senti caressed Frederick's head. It's okay. Senti looked to the rest of the staff. So, why have you summoned me? Rory pounced. Our great empire is at war. There should be no issues then. A Frederick is amongst you. We seek wise counsel. Rory continued. Senti looked down. Frederick IV avoided Senti's gaze. Senti jousted Frederick. Have you spoken to your father? Frederick was silent. Well, have you? Rory barked. Yes. And your grandfather? Senti continued. Yes. Your great-grandfather too? Yes. Great. What did they say? Frederick broke free and ran to a mirror across the room. This cannot be, he whispered to himself. Senti followed. What's the matter? Frederick broke free once more and darted to another mirror. This can not be. How could it be? Senti met him there as well. Frederick didn't resist. Senti, tell them how good of a friend you were to me. Frederick brushed Senti's ghastly complexion. You were a good friend, but I was not. Rory stood up at the table. What do you mean, my friend? Senti asked. Frederick looked up at the ceiling, but seemingly beyond it. For my entire life, I walked the path of my predecessors, but I could never keep pace. And now they have sprinted far ahead of me. They came to me in the night and informed me that they must leave my side, that I had offended their honor and ripped my name from the annals of our history. What could you have done that was so abhorrent? Frederick wept until he regained control of himself. When you called out for from the gallows, I was afraid to see you. You broke the chain that linked me to my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. All I could see was their scorn and shame. Frederick looked into Senti's troubled eyes. After the celebration, hosted in King Theobald's honor, he had you arrested. Right, and you were tried. Yes, and subsequently convicted. This is all true. The punishment for the charges leveled against you, hanging in the gallows, was fair, but the evidence, it was fabricated. The staff gasped. I knew it! Rory screamed. That evidence, in light of the celebration that you hosted. I knew it would be the perfect foil, that the pride of King Theobald would believe it. And he did. I told him that you had embezzled monies, as well as colluded with another nation. And he accepted my word as bond. The staff sucked in all of the air in the room. Senti pushed away from Frederick with haste. How could you? How dare you? You knew how much that position meant to me, and how right I was for it. You had me killed to assuage your vainglorious greed. Senti was so heated that he could breathe fire. He beamed his scalding eyes at Frederick. You fool. And because you are so, I wish for you to suffer a fool's fate. Senti spun away from them all and reduced himself to a bended form. Kitty reclaimed her seat, hiding his face in the arm of his dressing gown. Frederick watched as Rory crept slowly to him. Rory rested a knee. I knew from the beginning that you had something to do with it, but no one trusted my word. You call yourself a friend? I should spit upon your trifling head. You do not deserve anyone's pity. Frederick shielded furthermore, his face pressured to burst with tears that refused to fall. You send a courageous man, an honorable man, a competent man to the gallows to satisfy your own selfish pride, and then attempt to replace him with your pathetic inadequacies? Well, I hope you enjoyed yourself, because your time amongst our ranks has expired. Rory stood over Frederick. You drunken coward. You'll believe anything. There is no war. The Southern Empire never declared war upon us. Frederick's face red of shame. Carry him to a cell. He'll stand before King Theobald in the morning, and the hellhounds will drag him from the gallows come nightfall. The staff lifted Frederick from the floor, and he didn't resist. He could barely lift his head as they carried his limp body towards the exit. All that Frederick the XIV could manage was a mumble. I... Frederick relaxed altogether as the air hissed from his drunken lips. Dark paranoia. In a small studio apartment on the 4th floor, a cynical young man scratches indifferently at an early birthday present. The man's name is Aaron Newman, a man whom life treats without deference, honor, or success. Waiters bring him cold burgers, and gas station clerks shut doors in his face. On this day before his birthday, he is given a lottery scratch-off that will change not only the way he views the world, but everyone in it. Aaron scratched away at the lottery ticket, scoffing as he did so at the cheapness of such a thoughtless gift. But as the second box read 500,000 Han, same as the first, he felt his pulse double and thrum with the intensity of an orchestra of bass. He told himself not to get his hopes up, as the disappointment would only sour after that last scratch. But he couldn't help himself. His palms and forehead began to sweat, and he was acutely aware of his eyes beginning to blur. When the third $500,000 revealed itself, Aaron flew from his seat only for his legs to tremble, forcing him back down to the chair. His face expanded into the appearance of a scream, yet no sound escaped him as his throat tightened. He blinked several times and rubbed his eyes as to confirm to himself that this was not an illusion. And the numbers on the small slip remained the same. Aaron had won the jackpot, and it was all thanks to this apathetic, lazy idea of a birthday present. He decided he wasn't going to cash it right away. He didn't want to give the gifter the satisfaction of knowing they had given him such an exuberant gift. Aaron knew that they would claim credit as if they somehow knew they were giving him a winning ticket, and would expect Aaron to share his money. No, that simply wouldn't do. He'd have to play it cool and act casual with his life as if nothing happened. If the friend would ask about the ticket, he would say he won 20, which didn't feel like much of a lie to Aaron. Anyway, there was 500,000 after all. Aaron gave himself some time in his lonely apartment to collect himself and recenter his nerves. After several moments of balancing his breath and matting away the nervous sweats, he put on his shoes and left to go to the grocery store to have a personal celebration of his newfound, unsuspected success. Once in his car, Aaron drove down Main Street on his way to his town's small grocery store, the Piggly Wiggly, affectionately known as the Pig to locals. Realizing he's still jittery from his winnings, he sets his car on cruise control to keep a consistent, casual speed down the street. As he cruises, a black sedan rolls past a stop sign on his right and pulls in front of him, forcing Aaron to slam on his brakes. The car behind Aaron blares their horn angrily at them and swerves past him, continuing down the road as if this was all Aaron's fault. Aaron slams his fist on the horn as he glares at the black sedan. He can just make out a silhouette on the driver's side window. The shaded head appeared to be staring at him, though for what reason, Aaron could not say. "What the hell?" Aaron yells out at the dark car, which is idled halfway between two streets. Finally, it completed its turn and moderately accelerated down Main. Aaron muttered angrily under his breath as he moved on, eventually turning into the small parking lot of the Pig. The unfortunately meager lot was packed full of vehicles as Aaron weaved up and down the lanes. At last, he found an open space, and as he turned the wheel to park, a faded blue truck rushed in, nearly scraping Aaron's front bumper as it did so. Aaron laid his palm against the horn, blaring his siren. heads of pedestrians, walking amongst the cars, swiveled to glower at him, and the driver of the blue truck scowled at him as they raised their middle finger. Aaron's lower lip trembled, and his eyebrow twitched. He eventually gave up and parked along the curb at the front of the store. He saw others do it all the time, and figured just this once he would too. What's the worst that can happen? Now in the store, Aaron goes to the refrigerated meat section. He knows on most days he wouldn't even dream of buying himself a steak, as he could barely live on the salary he made. But the money he had set aside for rent was chump change compared to what's going to be hitting his bank later. Now was the time to splurge. He picks up a decently sized New York strip, then moves towards the beer. As he moved down the aisles among the other shoppers, Aaron noticed that several of them seemed to be looking at him with disdain out of the corner of their eyes. He saw a mother place her hand on the shoulders of her kid, quickly turning them away. Aaron wondered if he had something on his face, and offhandedly rubbed at his cheeks. Once in the alcohol section, Aaron inspected the beer selection. At first, he wondered if such an occasion would call for wine, but he didn't really care for the stuff. He settled on a 12 case of Blue Moon. He didn't know if he was going to drink all of them in one night, but wouldn't fault himself if he did. At the checkout, the cashier was loudly and sloppily chewing her gum. She never looked Aaron in the eyes, though did come close when she looked at his nose when she told him his total charge. Aaron couldn't say for sure why, but he felt like this cashier was harshly judging him in her mind. Let her judge. Aaron knew better. Aaron made it back to his apartment with little complication. The steak was overcooked, but the beers, all 12 of them, hit the spot nicely. He had music blasting as he danced awkwardly alone in the studio. With a break in the music, Aaron thought he heard something bang. He paused the music and stood, swaying, as he listened intently for sound. Bang! It was the window. Aaron rushed to the window, threw open the curtains, and looked outside to see 2 kids running across the parking lot in the dark, away from him. "You dipshits!" Aaron yelled. "Come try that again and see what happens." He moved to slam the window shut, and after blinking several times, he realized he never opened it in the first place. Now, with the mood killed, he slumped down on his couch with an aggravated sigh as he sat in desolate silence. Now he thought he could hear whispering, which sounded like they were being spoken just out of view of the corner of his eye. His head swiveled from side to side, yet he saw no one. Though no one could be seen, the whispers and hushed voices continued. They were malevolent, invasive, and bitter. He heard them snicker, as if they were sharing secrets that he wasn't allowed in on. He paced around his apartment room, looking under the couch and behind furniture. even going so far as to lift the pillows on his couch, but could not find the whisperers. An unsettling feeling rose in Aaron's stomach, and he knew it wasn't just the beer. He was reminded of all the rude, hateful people from earlier today. The people who, if they weren't casting malignant glowers, seemed as if they wanted to get him hurt or killed. That's when it hit him. They know. He doesn't know who they are or how they found out, but they know about his uncashed lottery ticket, and they're out to get his money. Fervently, he spun around, brushing off the aggressive quake to his head as he did so, and charged at the small coffee table in front of the couch where he left the scratch-off. He swiped it up and held it, clutched it against his chest. His pallid, sweaty face peered over his shoulder. The whispers were growing louder. No, closer, as he shielded his treasure. He slowly backed away from the table until he broke into a sprint across the room and into the closet. He slammed the door and collapsed on the floor. There he sat for the rest of the night, until after an unknowable amount of time had passed, and he finally fell asleep. The next day, his birthday, Aaron's head felt like it was being pounded in with a hammer, wrapped up by thin lemon slices. He stood up from his corner in the closet with an aching back and walked into the main room of his apartment. He looked at his phone and had somehow slept until almost noon, and felt grateful he didn't have to go to work that day. He moved to the kitchen, and with trembling hands, he poured himself a glass of water and gulped it down. He refilled and did this 2 more times before shoving his face in his hands. He usually doesn't remember nights of heavy drinking, but he can recall last night clear as a bell. He knows that people are out to hurt him, possibly even kill him, to get their hands on his money. So he decides he is going to cash in this ticket ASAP and secure his money in the bank. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, he hastily puts on his crumbling sneakers, allowing himself to reverie on the classy new shoes he'll replace these with. He shoved the ticket in his pocket and rushed out the door towards the stairs, neglecting to even lock his door on the way out. Driving down his street, he noticed 2 girls standing on the sidewalk, and he noticed them cover their mouths and laugh. And he swears he saw their eyes dart over at his old car. He scowled at them as he drove past. Further down the road, there was a fallen tree that blocked most of his lane. He didn't see anyone from the other direction, but in light of everything, he had started to get nervous. With sweaty palms, he turns the wheel to move around the fallen tree. No one jumped out to meet him with this inconvenience, but he could see the verdure around him, rustling with ambushers, waiting for the exact right moment. With the stirring vegetation around him, The violent chorus of whispers around him began again. They were louder and somewhat clearer than before. He can make out some of their plans to string him up, beating him senseless. The phrase, "catch him, kill him," echoing in his ears. His eyes are blurring as dime-sized droplets of sweat rush down his forehead and flood his eyes. His hands have gone far from clammy, as now he struggles to maintain a grip on the steering wheel. He uses his forearm to wipe away his eyes, only in time to see a shadow standing in the middle of the road. He screams as he swerves, driving off the side of the road and crashing into a tree. He awoke, unsure of how much time had passed, but saw that the sun had already started to drop. He blinks and squints as the sensation of something cooling slowly runs down the side of his face. He reaches up to touch it, and his hand comes back red. Stumbling out of the car, he hears a woman call out, "He's awake! He's getting out of the car." Aaron turns his head to see a woman and a man standing next to their vehicle parked on the side of the road. He looks to the tinted back windows and sees more of the shadowy figures, their heads turned to look at him. He gasps and looks back to the woman who cried out. Both she and the man carry twisted expressions of tentative eagerness. He knows they believe their time has come to take him, but he'd sooner go on his own terms before he lets them. He runs back in the direction of home, tearing down the street, lightheaded as he was, unsure of how much blood he'd already lost. He knew he just only had to get back home, and he'd be safe. He didn't see those two girls with their mischievous giggles from earlier, but he knew that they couldn't be far. There are several pairs of running footsteps behind him. He can sense them, though he cannot hear them through the tremendous pounding of his hard-pressed heart. The whispers are shouting now, eager and hungry, their hands reaching towards him with greedy claws. He reached his apartment building and dove into the elevator. He slams his fist onto the button for the 4th floor. As the lift slowly rose, the lights flickered and the walls rattled. Aaron raised his hands and clutched his head as the bitter pounding of his attackers assailed the outside of the elevator. The elevator doors open, and Aaron knows that as soon as he steps over the breach between the lift and the apartment floor, a hand should shoot up and grasp his ankle, keeping him immobile until the doors close and crush him. He jumps over it and runs down the hallway until he sees his apartment. Room's door is left ajar, barely an inch, but open nonetheless. Aaron stood paralyzed. Horror tingled up his body like thousands of avid insects. He knows he has to make a choice. Wait for them to reach him out here, or face them off in there. He likes his chances in there better, if only slightly. He runs into the dark room and slams the door behind him. Immediately, he sees the shadows huddled against the walls. They begin their devious whispering. "Here he is," they say. "Get ready." He can't take it. He thought he could, but he can't take it. Not anymore, and never again. With tears streaming down his face, Aaron cries out, "You'll never take me!" With a blood-curdling scream, he begins to run again. The lights turn on. The trap is about to be sprung. And Aaron Newman jumps at the window and plunges 4 stories down to the concrete below. Emma Newman, mother of Aaron Newman, shrieks. Friends and family, who had been hiding in the dark to surprise Aaron on his birthday, all crowd around the shattered window and look down. No one would ever be able to understand what spurred on this paranoia that led to Aaron's death, as all that was found on his person would be his wallet, his old crumbling sneakers, and a fake lottery ticket given as a gag. But that is perhaps the worst part of paranoia. The unknowing, a dark paranoia. The mind's twisted masterpiece, where shadows dance and conspiracies unite to throw a party that only the troubled can attend. Gloria. They liked to share these idyllic, quiet moments in front of the mirrored dressing table, George combing Georgina's hair. It was something soothing, calming, and therapeutic, a necessary and intimate ritual, an important part of their relationship, which they had been doing together since they couldn't remember, certainly since childhood. In complete silence, never a word spoken, Georgina in a catatonic state of mind, completely immobile, a trance-like state. George slowly, softly, gently glides the brush through her long tresses of hair. This quiet ritual went on for hours, quietly, blissful. They were inside a bubble of tranquility. Gloria watched on, grinning from ear to ear, lolling against the chair, propped up with cushions. Gloria had seen it all. Gloria was a gift, a valuable gift of subterfuge for George, a bribe from his parents to keep him quiet, keep his mouth shut, about the secret that must be kept in the family. No one, absolutely no one must know. You know that, George, don't you? His parents would explain to the innocent ears of George. This is Gloria. You can whisper in her ear if you ever want to talk to someone about it. Okay? Gloria became the listener, the therapist. And then she would pass on the secret information to Georgina. Georgina was the stronger of the two, made of rock. Nothing disturbed or frightened Georgina. That's why George doted on Georgina. He knew he was weak, and she was so strong. She possessed the strength for both of them. Gloria was so pleased to be added to the family and to be an integral part of it, The family was wealthy. The father, a world-renowned specialist surgeon from a wealthy legacy. He was privileged from birth, nannies, boarding school. His pathway in life was constructed and planned before he was born, from generations prior and generations to come. The tried and trusted way. His marriage was arranged, with only a select few who could be considered a match in their world. In those high circles of society, she was perfect, of similar family status. She didn't lose any of her privileges. It was a perfect transition from her maternal family into her family of marriage. She didn't lose any sleep over the matter. Life continued on as normal. Gatherings, parties, friends. It was seamless. When she became pregnant shortly after the marriage, it made the headlines on the celebrity pages. The joyous ink leapt off the gossip pages. She demanded to be fully anesthetized for the birth. Pain was not a word in her personal experience. Dictionary. She was completely unaware of the conception, totally out of it. She could have given birth to a horse, and was equally unaware she had delivered twins. Gloria was selected as a gift, a treasure for George. She was token of unspeakable secrets, unfulfilled desires. Her appearance with her blonde braided pigtails, gaudy red lips might have been misconstrued, but George hugged her lovingly from the very first time they met. His parents were incapable of showing affection, demonstrating their love with hugs and kisses, not in the normal sense. It was not accepted in their constrained, unemotional legacy, their upbringing, and it continued in this generational circle of supposedly refined upper-class family and friends. When Gloria arrived, George understood what he was missing. A feeling of unknown nostalgia for simpler circumstances, which he didn't have an inkling about or any comprehension that it existed. Another life, a different life, a life uncomplicated, without the subtle stresses or pressure continuously made by his parents. George always felt vulnerable, awkward, a feeling of an unfinished project in the presence of his parents. On the rare occasions he was allowed into company of his parents' friends, such as cocktail party events or saying farewell at nighttime, George was nervous, uncomfortable. Shyness overcame his speech as he stood dumb and gormlessly in front of the onlooking adults, inspecting George like an alien life form. "Strange boy," they would whisper as he turned his back on leaving the room. George heard the whispers, these overheard comments, like so many others, send him further into his interior cave of solitude and despair. At least George had Gloria to confide in, he always thought, and the thought consoled him. In the eyes of his parents, Gloria's arrival filled a gap. Gloria symbolized a desire for perfection, and control over George, which was completely immoral. The family secret must be suppressed at all costs. George was getting older and wiser. Gloria was introduced with the sole intent of keeping the family secret secure. Everybody was aware that George was the weak link in the subterfuge, the conspiracy, the dark secrets of the family. Gloria was the guardian. She was central to it all, and that made her the gatekeeper to the whole incestuous situation. She was the overseer and protector. The only person Gloria confided in was Georgina. Gloria's secret was safe with Georgina. Doing a good job, is he? That's about all he is good for, combing your hair, Gloria said sardonically, without moving her lips like a ventriloquist dummy. George is a sweetie, stupid as an ass, but he is my loving brother, and I will always protect him, even from your foul mouth. Georgina replied defensively. He's so stupid. He can't hear us, or he ignores every word. The truth. He's a lame brain. Gloria continued her verbal attack. You are the smart one, the strong one in this family. Georgina, if it wasn't for you, we would still be in the clutches of those dinosaur parents, the molesting evil creeps. Gloria continued. Don't say a bad word about Mummy and Daddy like that. Shut that vile mouth of yours, Gloria. Georgina was getting agitated now, but George continued the slow grooming strokes, undeterred, and it seemed oblivious to the conversation between Georgina and Gloria. The smooth grooming strokes of brush helped Georgina to keep her temper, remain calm. I won't tell anybody what you did. Don't worry. Those abusers of innocent children deserved it. Justice was served. Only you. Georgina had the balls to do it. George doesn't have what it takes. Never did. He always hid behind you, scared of his own shadow. The stupid one. Gloria continued in her negative tone. I watched on for years as they took you to their bed for their evil desires. For years, Daddy wanted control, his evil desires, his manipulation, his family fun. And she, Mummy, followed, a willing assistant, always pickled in her normal, alcohol-fueled state of mind, anesthetized. She was a lush most of the time. Both were heartless, immoral bastards. I was used like a comfort blanket, a rag doll, to make it seem normal. Those twisted monsters whisper in Gloria's ear. Gloria will keep the secrets of the night. Gloria will make any pain go away. Tell Gloria, but don't tell anybody else. Gloria mimicked the parents' words to their sexually molested victim. They deserved what was coming. George dropped the hairbrush and went to Gloria and started hugging her, whispering in her ear. What did he say? Asked Georgina. He says he loves me. And will I forgive him? Will I forgive him for his weaknesses? Gloria replied. Always the same. He's that stupid. He thinks it's his fault. Gloria was angry. Don't be too hard on him. We need him to be his normal, complicit self. We need his continued silence. We need him to keep his mouth shut now, more than at any time. These are dangerous times. No slip-ups. We all need to stick together. Otherwise, there will be trouble for us all, including you, Gloria. Understand? Georgina continued to look into the mirror, but her steely eyes and tightly drawn mouth emphasized the words. It was a threat. Don't you trust me, Georgina, to keep your dirty, obscene family secrets locked away in my head? Gloria said in a challenging, teasing manner. She was goading Georgina. Georgina lifted her right hand. Both hands had been hidden from sight, low between her parted legs during the long grooming process. As she lifted the concealed right hand, one could now see she was holding the blade of the 9-inch carving knife, splashed in crimson blood. The blood stood out a dark, dull shade of red against the shiny silver blade of the knife. Slowly, she raised the blade higher and then held it above her head. She held the pose and slowly turned her upper body and head to face Gloria. Unless you are looking for the same Gloria, I would recommend you keep your mouth shut, as you always have. It was the reason you were ingratiated into this family. Your loyalty has kept you alive and your dirty mouth tolerated. Your circumstances can change fatally if you start to change, my dear Gloria. Georgina glared at Gloria threateningly. Now let's clean up the mess. They say no bodies, no crime. Mariner of Innsmouth. I write this now from a hospital bed not far from my hometown. Though I am labeled delirious and force-fed medications whose names I cannot pronounce, do not believe that this testament is anything other than truth. It was 2 days ago, several miles away from the outer shelf reefs from the coast, when I was aboard a sailboat that drifted seemingly aimlessly over the waves. As the setting sun reflected its vibrant hue on the lapping crests, I, the schooner's sole passenger, leaned against a railing as I stared out across the waters. My name is Howard Phillips, and I was out on this solo sailing journey to find a new clarity in life. 3 days before was my father's funeral. My relationship with my father was a perplexing one. I looked up to and admired the man, but felt like I never really knew him too well. I found myself wondering about the conversations that would never be had, the beers never drank together, the lessons and the stories that would never be taught or told. After the funeral, I had expected to feel some clarity and peace, but instead found only distraught and confusion. And I now often wonder about my own life and where it could lead. I was left this small sailboat in the will, and I found it a sign of what to do next, and without a second thought, put everything else on hold, loaded up the boat, and sailed off into the unknown with the belief that I myself could be known. Now, with the currents pulling me ever outward from land, I treated this as an autopilot for the craft as I stared in a yearning way into the waters below. I watched as I saw a small school of fish swim by. Though I could not identify their breed, I mused at the occasional scaled adventurer who would jump from the water away from their brethren as they tasted the open air and observed a whole new alien world. I admired these displays and began to wonder if this was some metaphor from the universe I was meant to see, some natural guidance on my own mission for self-discovery. As I watched the fish surface to dance above the cresting waves, I felt I caught a glimpse of something further ahead in the water. It seemed like two orbs of crimson, as if two eyes were staring at me from below. But when I scanned the waters to better see these supposed eyes, they were nowhere to be found. I supposed whatever bigger fish they belonged to had swum away, or, more practically, it was a trick of the light of the setting sun. As it distortedly emulated back to me, I shrugged away from the shimmering vision and turned to face the mast. As I did so, I saw a large onyx storm cloud approaching fast in the distance. I rushed to the wheel, yet was too late as the rushing gales moved at a seemingly supernatural speed, enclosing on and whirling the small boat in all directions as my vessel lurched aggressively to and fro. My only option was to cling to the railing for fear of losing myself to the now crushing waves which hurled against the sides of the sailboat like slapping tentacles of a great kraken. The schooner broached and was nearly knocked down. As I was raised into the air, I looked down at the opposite end of the boat and saw that the mast was nearly parallel to the water. I then peered into what I believed to be the murky depths below, except that with a flash of thunder, there appeared to be land not far below me. With that quick blaze of light, I witnessed an unending plain of putrid mud, amassed with the carcasses of decaying fish and horridly foul, less describable things protruding from the sludge. I thought I would feel relief by knowing there was land not far below should I capsize. But instead, an even stronger fear gripped me, a primal fear that whispered in my heart of the unknown horrors hidden beneath the waves, as the unknown, lurking darkness between the spaces of rot and decay beckoned for I to join it in eternity. I witnessed and experienced all of this and more in that split second in the boat's rocking, in that short burst of illumination. But now the ship had leveled out and rode the waves on the merciless winds, whose howls in my ears sounded more like mournful ghosts of all the lost sailors who fell to their watery graves in all the histories of man who came before me. On the horizon, I saw once again those dark crimson orbs from before, though now they rose from the waves instead of hiding beneath them, with churning waters to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters. Those soulless eyes sat as two windows of malice against the face of a towering loathsomeness as it rose to face me. Two monstrous, scaly arms rose to cast in my direction. I turned my face and cowered in a squat huddle against my forlorn vessel, unable to hold my gaze upon the Goliath for fear of losing hold of my sanity. With my eyes squeezed shut and my whole self trembling, I prayed for release from the Leviathan's wake. The sailboat lurched again, this time with such force that I was knocked into the air and hurtled into the water. I felt the unsettling sensation of the sludged mire below, the masses of decay and putrid remains pouring over and surrounding me as I sunk deeper into the concoction of fetid slime and rotted scales which cut deep in my skin. I felt it seep into my nostrils and under my eyelids, and the groping carcasses felt like an incalculable sum of vengeful hands gripping me, pulling me deeper and deeper still into my shallow grave. My consciousness faded, and all went into nothingness around me. That's when I awoke next in a hospital near the coast. I don't know how I escaped, or what became of my father's boat. I only know I was found washed ashore, bruised and littered with abrasions. But I was alive. As I lay on my hospital bed, with no company but the memory of that nightmarish storm, I realized I had found the clarity for which I had set sail, though it was a clarity I would wish on no one, and wish only that we all could remain in our blissful ignorance of the truth. The truth that, as men, our place in this world is that of mere playthings on a board of cosmic proportions for being far beyond mortal comprehension, that the storm that man finds themselves trapped within is at the whims of those who rise from the deep. Not the brightest bulb, the light panned over the coast, gutting the night like a blade through a fish's belly. Emerson, Lee Saoiswa. From experience, he knew the storm would be raging well into the next day. But he'd be safe here. This lighthouse had weathered many storms before this one, and it would weather many more after, too. It had stood here since before he was born, and it would stand long after he was dead, which wouldn't be long now, he reasoned. He raised his metal cup to the windows, which looked out onto the frothing midnight ocean. He offered the night his cheers, then sipped his neat rum. Lightning lit up the abyss, burning his retinas white for one faltering heartbeat. The wind whipped and whooped around the edges of the lighthouse. The rumble of thunder came 3 seconds later, reverberating through his bones. Emerson blinked. The ocean was a cruel mistress sometimes. He knew that more than anybody. He'd spent much of his life aboard fishing vessels, at sea for months. He felt more at home on the open sea than on dry land. That was why he'd taken on the task of lighthouse keeper after retirement. But it seemed that people had lost their respect for the water. Kids rode inflatable beds out on riptides and needed rescuing. Rich yuppies took their boats out in unsafe conditions and needed rescuing. Partying youngsters went for midnight swims whilst inebriated. They drew the attention of the sea beasts, which they then hunted for revenge. And thus, the creatures needed rescuing due to their dwindling numbers. Companies dumped their foul excretions into the blue, so the sea needed rescuing too. Emerson growled and scowled out. The thunder and lightning lashed from the heavens once again. The rain pelted sideways at the window, rattling against the glass. The gale screamed like a dying creature, wounded by a harpoon. Another sound chimed throughout the lighthouse, but this had nothing to do with thunder. He grunted. Somebody had rung the lighthouse's doorbell. Who on earth could that be? The lighthouse clung to a rocky piece of coast that jutted out into the ocean. It was far from any town or village, as Emerson liked it. The only company he usually had came in the form of passing boats and hungry seagulls. Emerson took another swig of rum and set his cup on the table. The wood bore the marks of 1,000,000 condensation rings from the rum mugs of history. He grumbled to himself and passed through the door to the spiral staircase. The doorbell rang again as he descended. With care, the final treacherous steps. He threw the door open to the howling wind. "Yar, I'm coming, I'm coming. Hold your seahorses." On the stoop, two kids huddled together, no older than 18. They clung to one another as the wind whipped at them, and the storm soaked them to their bones. "I'm sorry, sir," said the boy, raising his voice over the gale. "But our car broke down, and we're stranded. Can we please hold up with you until the storm has passed?" Emerson was not a people person, but he was also not a heartless monster either. He opened the door to the boy and the girl and guided them up the staircases. "Yar, come in, come in. You're wetter than water. I got some blankies upstairs. Come, let's get you and your lass dry. Me name's Emerson." The boy smiled and offered his hand despite the chill that shook him. "Thanks, man. You're the best, Harry. And this is Skyla." Emerson led them up the winding staircase to the lighthouse's upper room, lit by the beacon. He got some dry towels, stale and mutt-eaten, but dry, and put the kettle on for warm tea. You must be pretty frightened. What with you stranded in the dark, and the rain, while the sea beats her chest like King Kong. She can be mighty fierce. The boy pulled a face and shook his head. He wrapped a towel around Skyla's shoulders before he tended to himself. No, inconvenienced and uncomfortable, but not scared. Emerson frowned, but bit his tongue. He guided the youngsters to his couch. It wouldn't be the first time it got wet, and handed them mugs of steeping tea. He sighed and sat down opposite them on his old rickety chair. "And what, if you don't mind me asking, were you two doing out here this late at night?" The boy and the girl blushed. Harry started to say something, but then Skyla interrupted. She shoved her left hand into Emerson's face. A diamond glinted on her ring finger. "Harry proposed to me tonight." As the sun set over the water, staining it red, the color of love. Isn't that romantic? To Emerson, red was the color of blood, once you'd chummed the waters to lure in the big fish. But he didn't say this. "Yar, it do warm this old sea dog's heart to see young love in bloom. Why, my Batilda and I, we shared quite a torrid love affair, we did. But she's been sleeping with the fishes for longer'n you've been alive. I still carry her picture in this old locket here, which I wear around me neck at all times. Here, take a look at this beauty, lad, but don't lose your eye for the young lass now, aye?" The boy blinked at the picture in the sea air-rusted locket. He did a double take. He seemed to struggle for words. His eyebrows knotted together like a bowline. "Sir, that's a manatee," Emerson recoiled. "You youngsters and your unrealistic Hollywood beauty standards. You shouldn't perpetuate such unhealthy attitudes towards appearances. It only fosters anxiety and insecurity. Yar, you might be young and lovely now, but see how pretty you'll look in 60 years. Let's see how you are once the sea's done rusted your lungs and your legs been took by an orca and a great white workin' in cahoots." The girl reached over and rapped a knuckle on his shin. A smirk touched the corners of her lips. "But sir, both your legs are still attached," Emerson yelped and tucked his legs back under his chair. "I jumped into the blood-stained brine, I did. Wrestled me legs back from the bellies of the respective beasts at the same time. Fought them both off, using nothing but me bare hands. I sewed them back on, I did, using nothing but a bit of old gut fishing line. I cleaned the wounds by spitting on them, then patched myself back up. It hurt for a while, but it didn't affect me well-trained balance on the deck. Yar, at sea you needs good sea legs, especially whilst Poseidon's throwing you about like a dusty old rug that your mama's trying to clean." The kids exchanged a glance and snickered. "That didn't happen, did it, sir?" asked the boy. "You're having us on." Emerson bit his lip. He knew how to get through to these young'uns, to teach them the proper respect they ought to have for the ocean. Emerson had seen waves taller than buildings and fish bigger than elephants. He'd seen currents sweep sailors to their doom in seconds. Emerson had seen men sink into the abyss as waves pummeled them like a boxer in a match with no referee to ring the bell. These kids had been on dry land, but the ocean was hungry. She could reach out and snatch you from the shore if she wanted. They had gotten lucky. The midnight tide hadn't pulled them out to sea, whilst the boy popped the question. Emerson got to his feet and slipped out the door to the spiral staircase. "I have something to show yer. You wait right here, my lovelies." Confused whispers came from behind him. Outside, the storm continued to rage. The wind screamed and the rain lashed. The ocean roared and threw itself against the lighthouse's base. The foundations shuddered. Emerson found the switch, covered in warning stickers, and flicked it. The lighthouse went dark. A small shriek came from above. He ascended in shadow, grinning at the panicked voices. He barged through the door and clicked the torch on. He illuminated his haggard face from below and bellowed. It was a dark and stormy night. Harry and Skyla screamed and clung to each other, their faces pulled in a rictus of terror in the torch's beam. "What the hell?" began the boy, but Emerson cut him off. The ocean was raging. The night was black. You couldn't tell where the sky ended and the water began. And we all knew that she, the creature, was out there hunting us. The hunters had become the hunted. A foghorn shattered the tension, deafening them all. Harry jumped up, knocking his chair over backwards. Skyla shrieked and threw her hands up to her face. A flick of a fish's tail later, the lighthouse shook around them. A great, wrenching metallic crunch rocked the world. Ice froze his limbs. He broke through the paralysis and staggered to the window. He shined his flashlight onto the rocks below. "Good God," whispered Emerson. The jagged stones had acted like a shark's teeth, puncturing the ship's hull. It leaned like a drunken sailor, 45 degrees to the side. On top, seamen clung to the rails, whilst others tried to scramble about the rain-wet deck. Baffled shouts punctured the storm's wailing. Boxes of cargo crashed into the surf. Some sailors tossed life rings into the brine to rescue men overboard. Emerson whimpered. This lighthouse had not had a single accident for almost 100 years. And now, in one swift hour, he'd caused a disaster. He should never have exaggerated the truth to impress these kids. The ocean was scary and beautiful enough as it was. It didn't need cheapening with manufactured myths and legends, but he'd tried to scare them into respecting the fierce hand of nature. Tried and failed. They thought he was an old coot who'd messed up on the job, and they wouldn't exactly be wrong now, would they? He'd forgotten the very lesson he'd been trying to teach. His shoulders slumped. Yar, I'm not the brightest bulb, methinks. Frayed edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m. Sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress, which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention. A second after he stood, or more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, this would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was, it would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months, along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath. Studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn, the light bulb dangled darkly, his desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. "Don't be stupid," he thought. "Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe." He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. What is wrong with me? He wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. Why am I so on edge? Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep. Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on, as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat, and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care. A jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes on metal hangers and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. "Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane?" There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes? Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity, and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. the person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blistered into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone. He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. Is somebody there? He saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. No, 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 no! He panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut. He thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again, then bang, and his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No, I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched, he'd been sitting at his desk drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself, a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail, like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent, and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters, painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. "There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo!" He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear, and worry, and sorrow, grief, and loneliness, and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left: anger. "Coming!" he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe.